Well, I think culture is a really interesting dynamic that you see in the boardroom. Theoretically, in the boardroom, the culture that you see there should be a microcosm of the organisation at large. And if you're thinking of joining a board, it's really important to have done your due diligence so that you have a sense of what is the culture of the organisation you're joining. And so therefore, in order to do your due diligence on the board culture, what you need to do is to talk to as many people as possible, other board directors, ask the chairman or chairperson what the culture is like. And when we talk about culture, we talk about how do things get done around here, what behaviours, what's the unwritten rules as to how debates and discussions, who talks first, who makes what contribution, how do things really work. It's really important to understand that so that you can decide whether that's a culture you will fit into, that you want to be involved in, and that you can have impact and make a difference in that boardroom. I think it's really important to earn the right to have a voice in the boardroom. It's easy when you get appointed to the board to think, well, I'm a non-exec, therefore I need to be listened to. Actually, as a non-executive director, you have no power. All you have is influence. And in order to have influence, you need to have credibility. And that's not just because of whatever executive role you used to have. It's really important to take the time to understand the business of the board that you're joining by going and spending time in the business, particularly if it's a business in the same industry that you have executive experience. It's really important to understand their challenges, their opportunities, because that'll be different from what happened in your previous life. It's also really important to build relationships with the key stakeholders, the key management team, so that you know them as individuals, you know what their strengths are, what makes them tick, you show that you care and understand them as individuals, because then you're more likely to have earned the right to be listened to and to have a voice that will be taken into account when debate and discussion happens at the board. In terms of what is least conducive, it's really the opposite, isn't it? And that's if you come in, you're overly opinionated, you mention your old shop, the place that you worked, you mention that every second sentence, and you say, well, when I did it last time, I did this, and you should do that, and without taking the time to understand the context and the environment and the differences, then it's likely to get the backs up of the executive, and you can recover that, but it takes time then to earn their trust and respect. And that's so important, mutual trust and respect of all colleagues around the board table, both executive and non-executive. So for new non-executives, it's quite a tricky balance to arrive at. On the one hand, you're desperate to make an impact early on, and so that you can be seen to be making a positive contribution. And yet on the other hand, you're quite nervous and unsure about how things actually work on the board. And so the risk that you run is that you are either too quiet, so you sit there and you stand back and you watch and you listen and you learn, and then you're seen as being not pulling your weight and being a bit of a lightweight, actually. Or on the other hand, you're too loud and too noisy and interject and seen as being opinionated and not really understanding the context. And so striking that balance and being very careful and mindful about where you make early on contributions is incredibly important. And actually for long-standing non-execs, and I notice that I run the risk of this just like any other long-standing non-exec, the risk is that you get into a pattern, you focus on the same things, board meeting after board meeting after board meeting, and then it sounds like a broken record, and people stop listening. Even if the point is right, people stop listening, and so therefore you have to find a different way to provide input or look at it through a different perspective or offer it in a different way or to different people or something or other to guard against that familiarity breeding lack of impact.